But what happens when Indian founders start to build consumer products for a global market?
Listen, like, your ears have to be on the ground. You have to listen to where your customers are lying, and that helps you with growth. For me, it's like, as a parent, if I am not going to place my baby in this product, then nothing of that goes into this product. Putting up that poker face is what you have to do as a leader.
I want to introduce Radhika. Radhika I'm very proud to say, a very Bengaluru hudugi. She came in a rapido here to meet all of us. So says a lot.
I made it on time.
San Francisco, Bangalore,
Yeah.
quite something. So yeah, we were talking about traffic in Bangalore and how she took a two-wheeler so she doesn't get late. Right? I haven't thought of that myself after being in Bangalore in a long time. So Radhika here runs Cradlewise. It's a very interesting company because it's one of those rare consumer tech T2C companies. It's only recently in the last 2-3 years that consumer tech hardware has taken off with an Ultra Human and multiple other companies, right? But Cradlewise was one of the early builders, and I will let Radhika introduce herself and speak about her company. And I have a bunch of questions. Once Nitin comes in, I'm sure he has questions, but we will keep the last 20-30 minutes for your questions. So please think about it, especially the healthcare founders, because she is building in the US and it might be very relevant for you. She's also someone who's seen that very tough journey of selling a hardware product to an average consumer out there. Yeah, Adhika, all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Nandini. Thank you
Can
so
you
much.
hear her? Should I get the mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Hello. Yeah. So thank you, Nandini. Thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity to be with Antler. I know Nitin way back from 2018, 2019, and we've been in touch as we build Cradlewise. So I'm Radhika. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cradlewise. I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old and 7-year-old. My kids are my inspiration for everything that I do, and that's how Cradlewise began. Cradlewise is into the kids' sleep space. Our first product is a smart crib. We help babies from 0 to 2 years sleep better. We are helping parents get back 2 hours every single day.
So I have a couple of questions. It's interesting that this came out of a personal problem statement of your child not being able to sleep well enough.
Yes.
Right? I think most people who are parents here will know that one of the biggest challenges in the early years is your kids just not sleeping. Right? And it's just a given. So why did you, so I have 2 questions actually. How did you think of this as a very unique problem statement to go after? It was a given culturally, we get a lot of advice, one.
Right.
And 2 is, when you face a personal problem statement, validation becomes that much more subjective. How did you go about validating this problem statement? How did you go about being very objective about building what you were building, considering nothing like this had been tried in the future?
Right. Yeah, so as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurial bias is something that you have to be very aware of because every entrepreneur believes that his or her problem is the biggest problem that somebody else has. Fine, if somebody even has a problem, are they even willing to pay for that problem, right? So being mindful of that is very important and very true. As a parent, you feel, okay, this has never been done. Let me make this, and this is going to be an exponential growth VC fundable company. That bias did exist with us, but we were very mindful from day one. And I remember standing on road with my one early employee and randomly stopping people who had a baby and talking to them. It was very difficult for me as an introvert to start with. I started my career as an engineer, so I was very individual contributor kind of a person. But I did that. I also was in Columbia Asia in the OPD trying to snoop around. Then I did find, and pediatric sleep, I'm talking about the time in 2016, 2017, 2018 kind of, sleep was not viewed as a problem. If baby is not sleeping, your mom is awake, father is awake, grandparents are awake. So it was very difficult to validate that, is it a need, is somebody going to pay? So I contacted a pediatric sleep specialist, which was very rare in the first place, but I did manage to convince him. and I sat in his OPD and I interviewed 200 people myself. There was a something called as an infant sleep survey, which is done by medical professionals, and I also did it in Pune. I basically am from Pune, so we did that, and it did help us understand that sleep is a problem. Parents are doing hacky stuff, and it also gave us a conviction that there is a white space, and parents are anyway spending through nannies or doing some hacky stuff to get to better sleep. And also for the US market, I so this was in India, and we always had an aspiration to launch in the US first. I can get to that, but we for validating in the US, I got a chance through anitab.org. I got a 10-day visit, and I carried the prototype. I had messaged people. I was part of mom groups, a lot of Facebook groups, and I said, "Hey, I'm working on this product. I need to speak to a few parents, and this is a $20 Amazon coupon that max I could expense." And I got, and it was in the Bay Area, so the early adopter ecosystem was very strong. I random people, unknown people, parents messaged me, and I carried the crib. I think so. I met Nitin in Palo Alto with the crib. And I did talk to strangers. I went to their home. I showed them. I said, "Please place your baby in this. Talk to me," in a very informal setting, met in coffee shops. And I did talk to 50 parents before even designing the first CAD model for the US version. So user interviews, seeking truth, not for a VC, not for a pitch, but for yourself as a founder, is what you need to do from day one, right? I think so that there's no shortcut to that. You will face some other problem while you develop the product if you're not close to your users. So this was all the things that I did for validation.
Two things strike me, right? 200 conversations. That's not a joke, right? Think about how many conversations all of us are doing. Second is that most of us struggle with putting ourselves out there. Most of us struggle with asking the person sitting next to you, "Do you want to work with me?" Think of standing on the streets and asking people, "Do you have a baby?" Such a loaded question also. But to ask that question and actually get responses shows a lot of hustle, right? And though hustle is one of those over abused words, so I thought that is something that I would certainly take away for this cohort, right? Because it's a hardware product and you were carrying this crib around, developing what could be an MVP for this is particularly hard, right? Capital constraints, not to mention that you were building something for a baby and that could go awfully wrong, unlike any software product where you can claim that it's okay, there are bugs. What was your first prototype or MVP like? What was the response like?
Yep. So we have had a number of iterations. I've lost count. First one was with my daughter way back in 2014, but it was more of like a SOS thing, where we never even thought that it's going to be a company or a venture funded company. That was more out of a need. By the time our second kid was born, we had like a wooden prototype where we were like, "Oh, we can't imagine going through the same sleeplessness again. Let's have something as a ROI for us." And that wooden prototype we actually sold to friends of friends, because around the same time a lot of our friends were entering parenthood, and we sold it to them out of our living room. We had a carpenter who was also really a hustler, who built something in hardwood for us, and we sold 4 out of our living room. I remember those days where I'm like packing and all of that out of our living room, and those parents continued to use even when the child had almost grown out of it, when the legs was like sticking out and stuff. So that was a very strong indication that if it solves for sleep, parents are ready to use an ugly looking prototype also. So those were the very early days. There was no company back then. There was nothing of this. We were like putting our own funding into it. And when we 2018 early 2018 we started full time. We had left our jobs and jumped in full time as husband wife co-founder. So we had planned a personal runway of 2 years. We had I was in Qualcomm, Bharat was in Texas Instruments, so we had some shares. So that was a buffer for us we could plan our personal runway for 2 years. And when we started full time, we hired our first engineers and stuff. And we had decided this was something that we had to seek for ourselves, that is data going to actually help with predicting sleep? And that's why we had to build uh, 20 to 30 prototypes. And unfortunately, for consumer hardware, without a prototype, it becomes very difficult to convince uh, for funding. And our first, and we did not have that much funding where we could pay employees out of our personal runway. So we did raise an angel round, which helped us build 20 to 30 prototypes, collect data, and validate for ourselves that this data is going to actually help with prediction. So that was a very important step. We did fail miserably in terms of executing it. It was too complex in terms of, uh, convincing somebody that you have to build 20 units for us, because no shop or no factory owner worth their salt wants to waste time doing such things. So it was very difficult. We spent a lot of money doing that, and we had challenges. It was just MVP, which is also what we have to think is how can you creatively build a minimum lovable product? Because with MVP, if there are challenges, then you don't know whether it's because of the way the user is not able to experience the product in full sense, that he's not loving it, or actually there is no need, right? So you don't want information to cloud because of the way you have designed the MVP. So it's very important to think through that, what you want to test. And then with all that data, it helped us get into HACS. HACS is a robotics and deep tech accelerator. We needed that support to pivot. Like we became a Delaware C Corp because we always wanted to launch in the US first. So Hacks was very impressed to see that, okay, we hustled through making 30 prototypes, and not just, it's not just a pitch deck. Those events did help us. And then our experiments in the US were, we first decided to launch only in San Francisco Bay Area. As Nandini mentioned, that a baby product, that's the last thing you want to do, right? It's a half-baked product. You don't, a software can crash. And but as a safety concern, as parents ourselves, we were very particular about that, US being a extremely litigious market. And our learnings of these 30 prototypes just helped us, because we had somebody who were like, I want it in Mumbai. And we were very particular that we wanted to do the 30 prototype beta only in Bangalore. But then we got amazed, and we were like, somebody from Mumbai is asking, somebody from Hyderabad is asking. Wow, Cradlewise is such a rage already. And we ended up sending 2 or 3 like the early prototypes in Mumbai and Hyderabad. And that was like really a big mistake, because still the product was not ready to ship. And you have to be mindful also that scaling slowly is the biggest challenge for a founder, that you have to show growth to VCs. You have to still, sales has to go on, but still scaling with quality becomes so difficult, right? That's the biggest challenge as a founder you'll face, that how do I control the growth with also maintaining the quality, else you will get dinged on reviews and a lot of other things, right? So we decided that we are just doing a beta in SF Bay Area. That's it. We are not going to talk to anybody else, because we have to be in 1 hour driving distance for parents. And I think so that was the best decision of our lives too. And because we had done something earlier, it helped us get to the next MVP stage.
So, I think Radhika is one of my favorite evolving stories from the Indian ecosystem, and I hope someday a movie will be based on your life, and it's like this the first chapter right now, okay, and I will pass it back to Nandini, but I'll tell you the observations, right? So the first time I met her, has anybody in your family been in business?
Yeah.
Who?
My grandfather.
Okay, but not like your family, your parents and all were not in business, right? Were
But
they?
I'm sorry to get in. I'm from a very typical Gujarati family, so business is always there in day out on dinner table every time. So it's
But
like,
you had, but both of you had been just like hardcore engineers. And
yeah, very much into
yeah.
job life.
And then everybody was telling you at that time, now if you still have some hardware or deep tech ecosystem, but at that time, 2018, 19, uh, everybody was telling you hardware is hard. And nobody was able to sort of lead an investment for a long time. So I'm sure there are some people in this room who have given up a harder idea, and you are pitching something right now, discussing something which is a bit more incremental but safe. And I want you to just go into, during those lows, whatever, 6 months, 1 year. By the way, today this business does 7-ish million
Yeah.
US in revenue, and
Yeah.
grew 5 times. And grew for 5 times last year?
Yes.
5x.
Yes.
And I won't ask you what your projection for this year is, but you can share if you want.
Yeah. Sure.
And not far from profitability. So I think, and I think that one of the first things to sort of realize about this is, so far we've always sort of like building in India for the world as SaaS. We used to be services, we went to SaaS, cheaper software products to do commodity things. Then now we've gone to dev tools, etc., right? But what happens when Indian founders start to build consumer products for a global market? Why don't we think harder about it? It seems very counterintuitive, right? What right to win does Radhika and from Pune have to win in the consumer market in the US, right? So I think that's another angle which we'll get to. But before that, how did you deal with so much rejection?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and that's where you need to ask yourself that what is your founder product fit, how deep understanding you have about the market, and what's your conviction, right? So there are, especially now with, I mean, India is great, India is shining right now, but in the US, it's a really tough time to build and to raise. And at that point of time, these existential questions do come, and I had a very simple answer to myself that, are we going to stop having babies? Is our parents going to stop spending on their kids for their well-being and sleep? And the answer was like, no. What does it matter if there is a funding winter or the economy is not doing good? Babies are going to be there, like something there will be for you, right? For you as a company, as a product, as a what is the pain point of the customer? And we truly are very passionate about sleep, and that's how we started. We had 2 or 3 other ideas that were in pipeline when we decided to jump in as a startup, but the answer was so strong that we are passionate about sleep. We as adults are spending a whole lot of money on smart beds, on the Whoops and Fitbits of the world to track our own sleep. What about our kids' sleep, right? They are the future. They are the smart creatives of tomorrow, and they are on an accelerated path of development. So these were all the questions that I'm answering every day, and that keeps me going. It's your passion about, and that reflects everywhere when you're pitching, when you're talking to a prospective employee, when you're doing your sales, when you're doing, so that has to be core, and that core gets shaken every now and then because of a lot of problems, right? You are a human, you get into the rut of execution, but that core will get you back to ground you, and that, hey, no, this is the business that I want to do for the next 8 to 10 years, right?
Can you guys hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. Do you have another question? Now that you're talking about this, were there points in your journey so far from 2017 that you started to now where you've considered pivoting into, a more sexy business or a different product, or giving up at, not just because of rejection from VCs. This is also a very hard problem to solve, right?
Right.
Everyone just assumes that babies do not sleep for X number of years, right? So just that mindset change must have been hard. Did you consider dropping out of this?
So it was, as you mentioned, right, like especially when, sorry Nitin, but with a men full of room of VCs, it becomes very difficult sometimes to convince that sleep is a problem, and it's like mainly the other partner's problem. Things have changed for good, I mean, which is a great thing. But we did face problems of TAM because there was no precedence, and does affect. We were looked as like, okay, you're making cribs, so for 4 million babies, and in 2000, like, we were looked as very small TAM. So I had to always convince that when smartphones started, nobody thought about smartphones and how it changed the app ecosystem. So we are also doing the similar thing for a connected kids room. So you do have to build a larger vision, because it's not going to work if your TAM and LTV, and these are real life questions that you will start facing as you scale. Today you feel, okay, this is a problem, fine, but then how many such people you have to replicate that unit of happiness, right, as you scale? And these are tough questions that you need to answer yourself, that ultimately your act one should be 100 to 200 million dollars, right? Because for a consumer hardware, at least we are looking at 5x kind of multiple. So is your act one going to do that? And then what's the act two? You have to think about it. What's the ecosystem? What's the moat? In consumer hardware is not going to bring you bread and butter to your table. It has to be subscriptions. So you have to think through that, and it's not for somebody else. As I mentioned, it's you seeking truth, that is a parent going to pay a month-on-month subscription. In SaaS, I understand that's what is the deferred revenue is the magic that gets you to those multiples. But for a consumer tech, you have to build subscriptions, because it's not going to scale. You are going to have customer support costs, you're going to have cloud costs, and the subscription has to finally work.
So I think just to go back to chronology a bit, right? So people said maybe as engineers, don't start something with your spouse, and you did that. And people said, don't build hardware, you did that. And I think then people probably would have guessed that you're not going to move yourself to the US. You have a family here. How are you going to figure out the immigration system and all of that? So what happened? How did you do it?
Yep. So we had a perfect mix to scare a VC away. Consumer hardware, husband-wife co-founders, babies. It's like, and two brown people launching in the US market, and we are saying that we are going to build a consumer brand, which is the most sensitive. Even the quintessential people who have experienced the US life have not. So we had like all these 3 points, which were like perfect recipe for scaring any investment and immigration. It was all about figuring out, okay, we have to launch in the US, and I was very well connected with the founder ecosystem. That was my only job, networking, but networking in the right way, right? Like first you will hit the wrong networking events which will waste time, but I had a founder friend who had done YC, and he told me there's something called Owen visa, and that clicked me. I did some research. He connected me to a lawyer, and then we figured out Owen visa. So I was doing, and at that point of time, like we had 2 kids, and I had no attraction for as a 21-year-old, I had to do whatever is required to get my business successful. So I figured out Owen. We got the fastest Owen and all of that, which helped me enable my dream of selling in the US. So we did everything that helped us. And one of the concerns even Nitin had is that it's very difficult if you don't relocate. How are you going to sell here? And that's a valid concern. And that was the best thing we did, because we can see what people are saying, what messaging they're using to describe the product. All that matters a lot. Experience going and living as a consumer in the US was very important, because I'm also going to Costco. They are also going to Costco. There is a festival there. I'm also experiencing that Thanksgiving. I don't know what Thanksgiving is sitting here, right? How am I going to message them? How am I going to feel them? I need to buy in the same market as my consumer. And that was a very valid point of VCs, that how are you going to talk their language?
So I don't think we are advocating that everyone go apply for an O1. You can. But I think this is something very important to bring out, right? Because on one hand, I just think I didn't think she would move, because I've never seen, I think it's just a hard move in general, especially if you have kids. And of course, as everybody knows, it's become harder in some ways, right? Of course, she navigated the O1 thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that I think she was there for, in 2019, had you already moved? No. So that's when I said, yeah, we'll meet at a coffee shop. And she's carrying the crib along. And if you can imagine the scene, I was like, okay, this person is very, very determined, right? She will go meet strangers, white Americans in a coffee shop, talk to them. Uh, and then I started to think, okay, she probably is one of those rare people who will go the extra mile, make the damn move happen. I don't think you need to move necessarily on day one, but I would say a lot of the conversations that I've had in the last couple of weeks with many of you, um, I feel there is an assumption that, yeah, we can, in today's world, we can just sit here and understand the US customer. I don't think that happens. I don't mean that you have to move, but anyone who's not planned to sort of go there for some time, at least spend a few weeks living and breathing the same air, I think you're making a mistake. And it's, of course, especially true in consumer, but also true in enterprise.
At this point, I want to actually digress a little bit, considering that you started this company with your husband, and a lot of people here are looking for their co-founders. It must have been easy also, because you know this person, you trust this person. But it also must have been very hard to draw boundaries. It must have been very hard not to bring work home, not to bring the same arguments home. Always a given, I guess, when you're building. How did you manage that? How did you, and for this cohort especially, right? One of the challenges that we face here is that how do you decide who does what and keep each other accountable, especially if you have that kind of trust built?
Right, right. Yeah, I would say if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have done with anybody other than Bharat. He's my sweetheart, college sweetheart. We got married, kids, and co-founder. I wouldn't have done. We have had our tough times. We do fight, cats and dogs, but he has been my biggest supporter from, like, even I remember when we had our first kid. I had my C-section, and I attribute my recovery to him. So I wouldn't have done any other way. Yes, there are tough times where how to demarcate, because it's like almost a family business. Our kids can pitch Cradlewise now. So it does become like a echo chamber with the same thing over and over again. But I'll honestly tell, my kids help me de-stress. We cannot just 18 hours think about Cradlewise. We have to build an environment, and that's my responsibility towards my kids, that they should not hate a startup. They should not think, oh my god, our parents did this and it has been like, always they're talking about some employee or some business problem. We want to help them grow up as entrepreneurs, so we have some responsibility towards that. And just our kids help us de-stress, and we do have to take time off. Weekends cannot be just also work. We do spend, and all this is for, so I would say, for me, you have to find what is that for you. For me, it has been our kids have been a very strong binding factor, and working with Bharat has been challenging, because as we scale and as the problems become tough, our personalities are really evolving. Like, I have a very different style of approaching a problem, and he has a very different style of approaching, and we do spark, but we then have started respecting that. And I have started becoming good at predicting how he's going to respond to a particular problem. And then sometimes I have realized that putting stuff down in a presentation in writing and then going and talking with him has worked better, instead of all over the place, because I have the luxury of just walking to him and talking every time. Doesn't mean that I take that liberty. So there have been these work in progress items that we have figured out between ourselves. And yeah, our kids have been just, such a pleasure to be as we, build Cradlewise, and helped us keep ourselves going. And most of the times what happens is, as a founder, you're so much into it and you're not seeing anything else, and you're taking knee-jerk reactions. With our kids, we are like, we have to stop working at particular time, so that gives us some time to just sleep over a problem and then get back to it freshly the next day. So it has really helped us slow down in a way, and sometimes that's okay. It's not like life is much more than your startup. Somewhere you have to draw that boundary. And yeah, I mean, Bharat is my biggest supporter. That's it.
This is all of you to go back home and support your wives who are
I know.
supporting you as you take this leap. Co-founder aside, it's a hard business to sell to your first team members, right? I mean, what are you saying? Obviously, you can't pay them as much as the market compensation rates. It's a consumer tech hardware company, started building in India, then moved to the US. How did you land on your first team member? What was that conversation like?
Yep, yep. Yeah, so our first team members were from our network. That's what is going to happen with each one of you. So you have to connect all the dots backwards simply, and you have to like go through all the phone contact list, your LinkedIn, and just build through your network. And our first hires, so one thing that we have done very mindfully is on the equity. We have been generous for our early employees on equity, because somebody who has a skin in the game or wants to put the skin in the game is going to be your early employee. And that's like also a litmus test, that is somebody going to stay through the thick and thin. And I'm very proud to say that those first 10-member team, I think so we have 1 or 2 people transitioning out, but we have people completing 5 years and I've given them gratuity. So I'm very proud that we have people, and we have stayed through that thick and thin. We have had our early employee, the key firmware guy, his father getting cancer, and for 4 years he had to struggle. Unfortunately, his father passed away, but we know what we have been through with him. Obviously he was attending and to his father, and then we were also scaling, and it was not the best time, but we have been with each other. And he's right now in Delhi, but he had been in Bangalore and for the last week, and I've been with him. So it's like a very strong bond with our early employees. Your network, you will have to pitch. And what happens is, when you have problems, you cannot show it to your team, right? So putting up that poker face is what you have to do as a leader to your investors. Doesn't mean you're lying, but it's like your day-to-day problems cannot bog you down when you're doing a sales pitch, when you're doing a VC pitch, when you're pitching to your employees, when you get up every day and go to office. And that was my biggest learning, that a leader is defined by how he or she responds to a bad news. A leader is nothing but how you digest or process bad news, because only bad news are going to come to you. Nothing else will come to you. When everything is going fine, nothing of that will come to you. Only the distilled bad news are going to come to you. So how do you process those bad news is what, and how do you react to that defines you as a leader. So yeah, you will have to get better at it.
Moving a couple more questions, and Nandini will finish with 1 or 2 more, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So continuing on the list of scaring VCs or other people, I remember when you were moving, or when you started to address the US, there was this big debate about play it safe, sell B2B to daycare centers. Don't worry about building a brand. How did you navigate that?
Yeah. So on day one, we somewhere knew that doing the B2B sales is going to be tough because of the nature of the product. Once we have a love from parents, and now we approach a Google and Facebook and say include it in your corporate benefits, is going to be much more easy, because it's like parents want it, and then obviously Google is going to include it in their parental benefit. So we had to show initial traction. Traction is very important. It does good for everyone. So what we did is in 2020, in end of 2020, we launched. We moved in mid of 2020 to US. End of 2020, we launched. We got 100 pre-orders. We hustled. I can talk about it on growth and stuff. But getting to those 100 pre-orders was good validation for ourselves. Early 2021, because it was COVID, the CES that year was all remote, all digital CES. And the cost was nothing. We had to just register and launch, and we got a lot of press. And I was like,
Or you had like Time Magazine's.
yeah, time best inventions. So we hustled through press. I can talk about other growth techniques, but you had to do that initial non-scalable growth. And we got 1,000 pre-orders in 2 months on our website just through, and we did not have a product that we could ship all across US. I was like, guys, I don't care. We'll figure out how to fulfill it. It's tough. I mean, sorry, but hardware is hard and SaaS is it's a tad simpler. I'm not saying that it's much easier, but we're like, okay, we did not have a product that we could box and ship. We were just hand delivering cribs in SF and Bay Area. So like, let's figure that out. So we got those that traction. The PMF of the 100 Bay Area samples helped us raise the next round. So basically, showing that traction was very key, and then that proved to the investors that these people can sell also.
And how many consumers have you sold to now?
We have 6,600 active cribs right now, but we have sold over 7,000 through the 2022 and 2023.
But again, I think, and so this idea of like you want to go face the consumer, right? And not even with a ton of branding, etc. But you want to be the versus play safe again. Because I remember there were a lot of people I spoke to, people who had spoken to you said, "Nahi, what she should do is just sell to daycare centers, be a white label. Like, fine, the device is nice, but how will you price it? What's your price?
$2,000.
And what's new at, or like a competitor?
It's at $1,695, but they sell it at 1,300-ish with all the.
So you have chosen to be at the higher end,
Premium segment.
which is, again, I think every choice Radhika has made has been not to play safe. Because, and I think this is something we're like, oh yeah, that's great, right? I promise you, if you talk through your business plans right now as you're thinking, it is somehow so conditioned in our mindset being in India. I'm sorry to use stereotypes. Myself, I mean, I also came from a middle class background. So it is almost like we are conditioned to think like, oh yeah, we will succeed when we make something cheaper. And if you are faster or better, you don't have to be cheaper. And pricing is something which I think deserves it. I believe pricing is the number one mistake that founders, especially from India, make. I think complete chronic underpricing because they don't think of value that you're generating. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, how did you choose to price this way? And my assumption here is that you realize that what you're selling, the value of that time saved for the parent is really the key.
Exactly, yeah. Very important point, Nitin, that like we undersell or we think cheaper is better. And especially not having lived in I don't even know how much do groceries cost. I don't have any sense of what rent is and all of that, right? And how the US folks think. So when we were still sitting here and pitching, people were like, who will give $800 for a crib? Like, are you crazy? Sell it for $4. Like, we got such a responses. We started selling at $800 and now we are at $2,000. So we did only 2 jumps in between and we are at $2,000. So pricing is a continuous discovery like PMF. And that's my favorite topic. For me, I knew that I can't go to an agency, do some consumer survey. There are secondary things that you have to consider. What is the cost of sleep? What is the cost of a night nanny? What are parents purchasing? I saw what nurseries had. I saw there was a bassinet, there was a crib. So I just did the addition. Okay, parents are spending $1,500 on small sleep items. So there are different ways of arriving at that price point. And always initially when you're not big, the biggest advantage you have is failure. You can fail and nobody is going to care. You're not a Google who is launching Bard or something, right? So nobody cares about your launch. First one thing is that we don't have something as a launch. It's always an iteration. So think about it as a continuous discovery. And one thing that we did, Nitin, and it's a very funny thing, and I don't know, is there a better way? We had a plugin for chatting on our website because we were locked down in India. We were going to move in July 2020, but how do I still experience what consumers are saying? We were we were not doing any advertising, but we were doing some growth techniques. So when people were coming to our website, they started chatting, and I was the customer support. So we had some interesting copy there, which urged people to chat, and I took the chats, and through those chats everything changed. Pricing, messaging. One person was a product manager in Amazon, and she was like, oh, it's developed by parents. I had to really go deep in and find out, why don't your founders put the photo of themselves on the homepage? That gives me more confidence that, hey, it's built by parents and they cannot go wrong. Like, so that helped us early on to like put our photos there. So, these are all discoveries. Your customers are ready to chat and ready to give so much feedback. You have to listen to that. It's like we have so much of data now and so much of learnings from our customers. And now also I have kept that culture. Like, my product manager gets on minimum 3 calls with customers for whatever reason. That's our selfishness to understand our customers. So figure out how can you short circuit and be with your customer and understand, because your messaging is going to come from that, your persona is going to come from that, everything is going to come from that. And we have a very strong product culture basically at Cradlewise.
So Divita and I were researching,
Yeah.
Cradlewise, and one of the things that stood out was one of your investors, Vaibhav, sort of called you the iPhone of baby tech, right? Such pressure.
I know.
What did that do to you, and how did you nail that sort of positioning? Admittedly, it came from a VC, but
Yeah.
not your customer. But where are you on that journey?
Yeah. Still a lot to be done, but I feel very humbled to be compared. Like, our customers also say Tesla of baby cribs, and it feels so nice to see these messaging points coming from our customers. So having that, like, for me, it's like, as a parent, if I am not going to place my baby in this product, then nothing of that goes into this product, right? So that has been the benchmark. So making it simple, the UX, we couldn't pay much attention to UX early on, and that's okay, because we realized that if the product, whatever product, it could be a SaaS product, it could be a physical product, if it's helping solve the hair on fire problem, the typical, like the Paul Graham's essays that we read, I experienced that if it's going to help the baby sleep, people are ready to work around with the rough edges, and you can mindfully keep have milestones that, okay, I'm going to start attacking the UX at this point. First, I'm going to solve for quality, then get to scalability and all of that, right? So you have to set some milestone. We also are very particular about NPS, that beyond this, till we don't hit this NPS, we are not going to go aggressive on sales, because it's going to hit back, because that we are just then going to do more of customer support. So there will be some insight for scaling, some playbook that you will have to develop, that this is what I stand for, and this is what I will do. Sometimes it becomes difficult, you have to keep iterating, but there has to be some data backed insight for scaling your product. And what we have done to get to that is build more trust with the community, our certifications, the way we talk, like what we stand for. We are very gentle parenting oriented brand, and there's a wide range of normal for when it comes to parenting. So there are few core values that we don't ever give up on, whether it's a hard time, hard customer, and that has just helped us. And we have been always very transparent. We don't give products to influencers just to take cool photos and talk great about us. It's a parent who is actually using it, and your customers can see through that. So all these touch points, if you're building a very high value brand, make a lot of difference, especially in the consumer space. You have to connect, you have to see your customer eye to eye. And all this has really helped us. And obviously, quality is a given, right? You can't say that that's my differentiating factor. They don't care whether you are a startup. The US consumer is so picky, nitpicky. They are going to compare you to an Apple. They want that. If I'm giving $2,000 means it's done. In fact, I sometimes feel that if I had priced it lower, I had some leeway into being a little shoddy. But when you're selling a crib for $2,000, an average cribs, our target audience purchases is for $800, the expectation is through the roof. So people don't care whether you are a startup. They are using iPhone. That's the gold standard. So it's a continuous improvement, but don't be afraid to launch half-baked products, because early adopters have the capacity to digest that, and we saw that with our eyes. We went to deliver the first 10 cribs, and it was not pairing. 3 hours we are debugging, and that person sat patiently with us, helping and being very empathetic towards, hey, I've been there. Maybe he was a product manager or a founder himself. You should have some thesis, what you're testing. If you have 5 parameters that you're changing, then you'll not know which parameter helped you land that sale. So landing pages has helped us. We also realized that one of the biggest thing that we do converts, non-convert surveys. That started happening only when we had a sizable audience. So initially, if you are having 10 customers or 100 customers, it's become difficult, I understand. But as we scaled, we developed a routine of doing converts and non-convert survey every month, every quarter, and that has given us some insights that our community is looking for reviews on Reddit. They said that brands tend to cherry pick reviews on their website. Unfortunately, we don't do that. We comply to all the FTC guidelines for reviews, but the perception is so. So then we started a Reddit community just in Jan, and that's going really well. So listen, your ears have to be on the ground. You have to listen to where your customers are lying, and that helps you with growth. And our Reddit community is doing really good, to my surprise. I'm not a native Redditor. I have last quarter in Q4, I just tried to understand what Reddit is and all of that, and so but I do understand that is like third most visited website, and our Reddit marketing is working very good, not just Google and Facebook, right? So landing pages, messaging, having your target personas. We realized when we talk to our customers is dads feel left out. We are not having enough messaging towards that. We then got some dad influencers, tech influencers who are interested in unboxing and tear down. That has helped with resonating with dads. So these are all the things that you will have to experiment and then grow, because advertising is just amplification. It's not a means of sales. You have to figure out the sales and just then put the money in the right direction to amplify. And not having that luxury is actually very great, because initially when we went to US, we had, I think so, less than 600,000 in our bank account, and by the time we raised our next round, we had only 200,000. So we have experienced death many times. So we had to be very creative. We did not have a choice and with pandemic, we did not have much clarity how it's going to pan out and all of that, early 2020, right? So having that luxury to not spend is the best thing, because you'll figure out what the messaging, where does your customer hang out. If I had not listened to my customer, I never knew that Reddit is where they're going for reviews. And Reddit is very democratic. Maybe you guys, if you are having a SaaS product, it's a very good channel. You should try to, and it's picked up so much in India also. We have few fans of Ultra Human in our company, and they told me, I had this problem, and somebody from Ultra Human responded on Reddit, and I became a fan of that. So these are the things which you have to be very close to your customer as a founder. Yeah.
Great. Considering you're at the intersection of health tech and hardware, if you had to identify opportunities that other people, other founders should build on, or you wish that you were building on, what would those opportunities look like? What would those problem statements look like?
I'm going to be candid, we get some existential crisis questions ourselves because Bharat is very interested in AI and we're building a cradle. So, so I mean, everybody knows like AI is the next thing. It's going to be maybe the last thing and all of that, right? So we have some ideas in AI and electronics because we come from semiconductor world. So we sometimes feel, oh, is it like FOMO? Are we missing out? I would say, I mean, there are buzzwords, but you need to, there has to be a real world problem that you're solving, right? If you ask me and Bharat, we were doing AI in 2018 when we made the first 30, we collected data. That time, it wasn't a buzzword. Obviously, OpenAI was already onto something great by then. But we are also doing that. We have the largest data set for baby sleep. And for adults, it's very easy to collect sleep data, wearable. With kids, parents don't want anything around them. We have contactless baby monitoring, and we have the world's largest data of baby sleep because there some research and all they do for 200, 300 babies. We have like more than 10 million hours now of baby sleep collected in Cradlewise. So we are also, we are doing cry detection. We are doing posture, like we are doing awesome things in AI. It
Without calling
doesn't,
it AI.
yeah. So we are, I always like we convince ourselves that yes, we have like, we are on the AI path. We have a very strong AI team. And that's what is Bharat's core expertise also. So I would say that these buzzwords are fine, but ultimately you have to build a business, right? Somebody has to pay you whatever is your monthly subscription, 500 rupees. Why should somebody pay you? That core need has to be solved. You can use these tools, but ultimately thing is finding that product market fit, right? Why is somebody going to, okay, there's an AI for creating pitch decks. Yes, there is a need. There is an AI but you have to figure that out. I feel that AI is definitely something that if I was starting 0 to 1, I would have dwelled on that space right now.
More than anything else, what stuck with me, Radhika, is just the resilience with keeping the larger vision in mind and pushing through, right? And I genuinely think that more people should hear your story, right? And so I would love for you to come back again some other time, speak to our portfolio as well. But thank you so much for taking the time out. I know it's a busy India trip for you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having. Thank you.